Popular culture possesses a deeply ingrained, almost pathological obsession with the archetype of the anti-hero. Audiences instinctively romanticize the rogue, the unpredictable rebel, the dangerous outcast who operates outside the suffocating constraints of societal law. Within the historical archives of Westeros, no figure embodies this idolization more completely than Daemon Targaryen. He is worshipped by historians and audiences alike as the ultimate manifestation of Valyrian supremacy, a chaotic, fearless, and entirely free agent. But if we strip away the seductive mythology of the dragon-riding warrior and subject this man to a cold, clinical psychological autopsy, the romantic illusion of the rogue prince entirely collapses. What remains is not a terrifying agent of chaos or a philosopher of freedom. What remains is a remarkably predictable, deeply traumatized man suffering from a massive, unfillable void of validation. We are not looking at a master manipulator or a liberated rebel. We are looking at a textbook clinical case of second son syndrome, wrapped in a defensive armor of narcissistic self-sabotage, performing a lifelong, bloody theatrical act for an audience of exactly one person, his older brother. To understand the architecture of Daemon's psychological paralysis, we must first examine the structural cruelty of the Westerosi succession system. In a feudal monarchy, the firstborn inherits the world. The crown, the absolute authority, the respect, and the historical legacy are all handed to the eldest. The second son inherits nothing but existential dread and martial expectation. King Viserys was given the Iron Throne and the unconditional submission of a continent. Daemon was given a sword and the horrifying, suffocating realization of his own irrelevance. For a narcissist with a god complex, invisibility is a fate far worse than death. Daemon is utterly terrified of being irrelevant. Because the systemic hierarchy of the realm denies him structural value, he is forced to manufacture his own value through disruption. His adoption of the rogue prince persona is not an expression of his true, liberated self. It is a meticulously crafted, pathological costume. He wears this identity to mask a desperate, starved inner child, begging for his existence to be acknowledged. This desperation manifests most clearly in his weaponization of negative attention. When we observe his brutal militarization of the City Watch, or his horrific, deeply cruel toast to the heir for a day, following the death of Viserys' newborn son, we are conditioned to view these acts as the moves of a dark, Machiavellian villain plotting to seize power. But clinically, these are not the actions of a political mastermind. They are the hysterical, catastrophic temper tantrums of a neglected child acting out. Psychology dictates a very clear rule regarding emotional starvation. A human mind that is denied positive affection and structural validation will always prefer violent punishment over being ignored. When Viserys reacts to Daemon's atrocities with screaming rage, stripping him of his titles and sending him into exile, Viserys believes he is punishing his brother. But in the twisted, trauma-bonded psychology of Daemon Targaryen, this exile is a massive emotional victory. Why? Because in that moment of rage, Daemon has successfully monopolized his brother's entire emotional bandwidth. He may be hated, he may be banished, but he is undeniably the absolute center of the king's universe. This pathological need to extract validation from Viserys explains the entirety of the Stepstones conflict. Military historians attempt to analyze Daemon's war in the Stepstones as a strategic geopolitical campaign to secure a trade route or establish an independent kingdom. This is a severe misdiagnosis. The Stepstones was not a war of conquest. It was a bloody, 3-year-long theatrical performance. Daemon is carving a kingdom out of barren rock and crab-infested islands simply to prove to his brother that he is capable of being a king. The ultimate proof of this psychological reality occurs when Viserys finally sends ships and aid to help Daemon win the war. A rational military commander would welcome the reinforcements. Daemon, instead, brutally beats the messenger nearly to death and launches a suicidal solo charge into the enemy lines. He reacts with such violent hysteria because Viserys' military aid implies pity. Daemon does not want to be saved. He does not want pity. Pity is the antithesis of respect. He is waging this war to force his brother to admire him. When Daemon finally wins the war, he does not stay to rule his new kingdom. He abandons it almost immediately, returning to King's Landing to dramatically drop his driftwood crown at the feet of Viserys. This is not an act of genuine loyalty or submission. It is a highly calculated, narcissistic transaction. By surrendering the crown, Daemon is screaming a silent demand. Look at what I have built. Look at what I have conquered. Now tell me I am worthy. Tell me I am your equal. He does not actually want the administrative burden of the Iron Throne. He wants his brother to publicly declare that he is worthy of sitting on it. He desires validation, not governance. But here we encounter the most destructive mechanism in Daemon's psychology: his chronic, involuntary cycle of self-sabotage. Whenever Viserys finally relents, accepts him back into the fold, and embraces him as a brother, a psychological countdown begins. Very shortly after being welcomed home, Daemon will inevitably commit an unforgivable offense, such as taking the young Princess Rhaenyra into a brothel to ruin her reputation. Why does he repeatedly destroy the very acceptance he bleeds to achieve? Because he is fundamentally addicted to his identity as the outcast. If Daemon were to accept Viserys' love, settle down and become a dutiful, obedient lord of the court, the rogue prince would cease to exist. His entire identity is built in opposition to authority. Without a brother to rebel against, Daemon is a vacuum. He is terrified of peace because peace requires him to confront his own profound emptiness. And so, he sabotages his own life. He commits the crime, forces the exile, and restarts the toxic cycle of rejection and redemption. He is trapped in a behavioral loop, completely unable to break free from his own pathology. This entire psychological architecture collapses the moment King Viserys dies. With the death of his brother, Daemon's compass shatters. The audience of one is gone. The authority figure he spent a lifetime rebelling against and secretly performing for is no longer there to watch the show. His subsequent loyalty to Rhaenyra is heavily fractured and dangerously erratic precisely because she is not his brother. She cannot provide the paternal, combative validation that his trauma requires. During the Dance of the Dragons, Daemon becomes a ghost haunting his own life, a weapon that has lost its primary target. This brings us to his legendary final confrontation above the god's eye. When Daemon drives his sword through the eye of Daemon Targaryen as their dragons plummet toward the dark waters below, it is immortalized as the ultimate badass sacrifice of a warrior. But a clinical reading of this moment strips away the heroism. When Daemon looks at Aemond, he does not just see an enemy combatant, he sees a mirror. Aemond is a younger, angrier, deeply broken second son, desperately overcompensating for his own insecurities with violence and a monstrous dragon. Daemon's leap from his saddle into the abyss is not a heroic sacrifice for the realm or for Rhaenyra's claim. It is an act of terminal, psychological exhaustion. He destroys Aemond because he is destroying the reflection of his own wasted life. He allows himself to fall into the dark water because he has simply run out of reasons to perform. There is no one left to impress. There is no one left to anger. Daemon Targaryen was never a free man. He was never the liberated, chaotic rebel the history books painted him to be. He was a prisoner of his own narcissism, spending his entire existence living in the shadow of a throne he never truly wanted to rule, begging for the approval of a brother he pretended to despise. He was a spectacular, self-immolating illusion, generating massive amounts of fire and blood only to leave behind absolute, deafening silence.